I hope.
Thanks, Evan, and welcome everybody to our webinar this afternoon. My name is Sarah Withy, and I'd like to start off by introducing our presenter, Dr. Ute Lahey. Dr. Lahey is currently IELT President and Dean of Undergraduate Studies at Walsh University. Before coming to Walsh, Dr. Lahey served as Department Chair and Professor of French and German. Before that, she held a dual-track appointment as a Language Center Director and Professor of German. In addition, Dr. Lahey has served as editor of the IELT Learning Center Management Manual, the 2nd edition. And the topic of today's webinar is From Language Lab to Language Center and Beyond, Rethinking Learning Spaces for the 21st Century Learner. So with that, I will turn the presentation over to Dr. Lahey.
Hello, everybody. So, welcome this afternoon or this morning or in the middle of the night, whatever time it may be for you. I'm really excited to see that people come from so many different places. We actually do have one participant from India, and I was really excited to see her. That's Mita. A very special welcome, and so yeah, we'll just get started. Feel free during the time when we actually, during my presentation, if you have questions, to enter those into the chat. Evan and Sarah will monitor the chat, and then you can actually get responses later, or they'll collect them, or they may also interrupt me. So just to tell you a little bit about the agenda, I try to incorporate as many questions as possible from those that you actually submitted in advance. However, I didn't always write the questions out the way they were, but I try to organize my presentation in such a way that it reflects the responses. You may have other questions, so as I said, there are times in the chat, but there are also possibilities just at the very end of the session to join in live by turning in on the microphone. Okay, just to give you the agenda, since it's not possible for everybody to introduce themselves, I basically have introductions in forms of polls. Then we'll talk a little bit about IELT, what it actually is, since this is an IELT presentation. Then we talk about designing and managing learning spaces, what this really means. Then also assessments, since there were questions about that. Then we'll also talk about helpful sources and questions and discussions. And before I get really started, question, can everybody hear me all right? Or are there any problems? Okay, very good. So yes, Sarah has already introduced me, so there's really not much else to mention. I do have also my email listed here in the webinar, so this way if you have any questions after the session, feel free to contact me. Okay, so first I would like to know a little bit more about you. So this way you have a chance to actually participate in the poll. This is an ABCD poll, so you have only one possibility. Please just let me know what would best describe you. Are you currently a learning center or a language learning center director, or a language technology professional, a language faculty member, or a faculty member in another discipline besides languages? So I want to see the polls here. Okay, not too sure whether it's everybody so far. I haven't really added that up, so but it seems like we have quite a number of language center directors here. Very nice. So, and I don't know how this poll is displayed for everybody, but I can actually see it on overlaying the PowerPoint. Okay, so good. Then let's go on to my next poll. And here, I just wanted to see your current technology center in your institution. I would like to find out what would best describe the technology situation in your department or institution. Either do you have a traditional language lab or a dedicated language learning center, or a technology center for interdisciplinary use, such as a humanities resource center or a library commons. Or maybe you don't have a center currently, but you would like to plan one. So let's see what your polls are. Okay, so just click on A, B, C, or D. Okay, so we have quite a high number here now reporting that you have a dedicated language learning center. Very good. And okay, good, very good. So now, just to let you know, since not everybody here may be a member of IELT, so what is IELT? That's the International Association for Language Learning Technology. And yeah, the mission of IELT is really to provide leadership in the development, integration, evaluation, and management of instructional technology for the teaching and learning of languages, literature, and cultures. Really what marks IELT in a very special way is really its community and its willingness to share the expertise among the members. So for those who are new, I hope that you can join us at a later point as well. Here the regional groups, from the registration list, I actually saw that we have pretty much all the groups represented. We have groups, Mid-Atlantic Group, New England, Northwest, South Central, Midwest, Northeast, Southeast, and Southwest. And then also as one of our more recent groups is India. And Mita is actually joining us here from India in the middle of the night. So, and a very special welcome to her. Also, what I wanted to say is that this time, as Evan mentioned earlier, this is really a very special presentation or a special webinar, since it's hosted by LARC, by the Language Acquisition Resource Center in San Diego, and Evan is our host for that. And the webinar team, for those who joined late, we have Evan Rubin and Trevor Shanklin from LARC, and Sarah Whitty from Colorado College, who made all this possible. Thank you very much for the for the three of you. I can't count today. So, okay, learning spaces then and now. What are learning spaces? I mean, you probably all know the old-fashioned labs. Let me see what I can actually draw. This here, okay, my drawing feature doesn't work. This here really describes what I first encountered when I assumed my first position as a lab director. This is a typical lab in the 70s style, where it was tied to the audio-lingual, later the audio-visual method. We had those nice tied rows, and basically the principle of this design was really form determines function. There is really not much variety of what went on in this classroom or in this type of lab. It was really just drill and kill activities. What we're about now is really designing learning spaces, and those images that you see here, which would be, okay, I'm just struggling with my pen here. Okay, this one here, and okay, still not working with the pen. I guess I'll just try the pointer. Okay, those two other photographs are images from the new learning center, or the new academic center at Walsh. That's actually still in the planning stages. Those are special drawings and renderings from the architect. And this is designed to be a collaborative 21st century space. And as you can tell from just looking at the images, it's rather free flow and open. And here the design principle is that function determines the form. So quite the opposite from beforehand, where it was very static and one special instructional method had dictated what's going on in the classroom. Now for this new space, really the sky is the limit, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Also, just to give you a background, if you are not familiar with IELT, IELT actually has two capstone publications, the Language Center Design Manual, and then also the IELT Management Manual. If you're in the process of designing or redesigning or building a center, these are the publications that will be very helpful. Okay. Now, for me, as I initially designed the Learning Center, the most important advice that I could get was really on asking questions. And this is also true particularly for 21st century learning spaces. Since the function determines really the form, it's really very important to start with the questions, to start with a backwards design. It's important to ask, how will the space be used? Will it be used for some type of classroom instruction? Is it going to be for just strictly language use or interdisciplinary use? Or is it really just a humanities resource center where multiple disciplines use it in various ways? Is it going to be a collaborative space, or is there also open access use, video conferencing, or project development? Then also, what's also important, what kind of projects will need to be supported? Again, interdisciplinary or global projects or creative projects. For us, this is really the driver, actually, as we're getting ready for this new learning space. Because, as I said, we really need to start with the end in mind. Then also, what's important is to ask who is actually going to use the space. Will it be faculty and students in some sort of classroom type environment? Or will there be team projects or independent study users? Or will clubs also use it? Is it going to be a tutoring space? Or will there be also some sort of a movie space, etc.? Yeah, here, since we're using the term learning spaces, I just want to make sure that everybody actually knows what we are talking about. I think it's fairly clear in some ways. Learning space instead of classroom is a term that is now being used since we're really going away from just a physical space. And here this special graph from ISTE actually explains it rather well. So the traditional one would be still the formal space. Then we also have the virtual space for online. Then we have the informal spaces in between that in the past used to be mostly just hallways or the places leading from one area to another, and that are now being used in a much more purposeful way to allow for collaboration. And at the center, in the overlap, you see really that's where innovation is actually taking place. Okay, managing learning spaces. This is something that's a little bit more traditional, more typical for a learning center. You have a learning center, language learning center director, maybe or maybe not a technology support specialist. You have the faculty there. You may have an advisory council. You have student and student staff. You may also have a mixed group of faculty and staff and student. And then, of course, you have full-time personnel. Some of the personnel may be on tenure track or non-tenure track. You have part-time people, and you have work-study students. So it's yeah, very mixed group. For designing and managing learning spaces, this model that is really typical for a language learning center really didn't quite work for us here at Walsh University. So what I designed here was actually a learning spaces task force. And this is the group that initially is working on the designing and managing and implementing of initially a small model learning space that will then lead into this big learning center. But it's also going to be the group that is forming the advisory council later. So the model is the TLTR, that's the Teaching Learning Technology Roundtable. I have the information, the web information here on the bottom of the screen, and it's also on your handout that you can take with you later. And also, just as an aside, the PowerPoint also will be made available for you. Okay, so as you can see here, what we have here as part of our advisory council or as, of our task force is our representatives of all the different disciplines. Then also global learning and global partnership. Those are special offices here. Then the library, information systems, and the registrar, since with this new building, what we also see as changing would be also not only the physical space, but also time as we know it, registration as we know it, and that's why the registrar had to be involved. And of course, for the technology, and we really need information systems because we're really looking in a very forward way at current existing technologies and beyond. Okay, here an image of the learning center at Walsh University, the way it's designed to be. So this is a new academic center, a very interdisciplinary center. And as we're getting ready for it, we're really charged as a task force to design a flexible model space that will prepare the faculty for a new center, both in helping them to giving them a space to experiment with the students, but then also a space for faculty development. And of course, we're developing a framework for using this space. And last but not least, also we prepare the faculty for teaching with the 21st century skills and beyond. Okay, 21st century skills. When managing a center, it's really very important what will actually go on in this place. 21st century skills, this was something that was becoming very quickly very important to me as we were starting to get ready to meet as a task force. Because Ohio is one of the first states here in the United States that has adopted a Common Core, which means the students are already being taught using the 21st century skills, and which basically means as faculty we have to be ready for the students once this entire first group graduates and comes to the university in 2016. And one of the very big important aspects for 21st century skills is really the focus on global awareness, and really the way it's also explained by the Partnership for 21st Century Skills in an article that I cited, also my sources here, is really the ability to communicate in languages other than English. And of course, this seems to be in direct contradiction with what is going on currently in the United States, where languages have been much more in decline. Their level of importance is often not very high. And study abroad opportunities, a lot of students don't actually decide not to actually go abroad because of financial reasons or because their schedule is so tight, and a lot of students also don't see the importance for a study abroad. So, but yet this is one of those really important goals for the 21st century skills. As we're looking at spaces, one of the questions that came, how do we design virtual language lab spaces, or do we actually need even physical spaces? Of course, we've seen a lot of brand new tools coming up in a recent article by McDonald that was published in the IELTS journal. He described the virtual language lab as a assistive tool consisting of those Web 2.0 tools and different writing tools, collaborative publishing tools, then of course the textbook specific technologies, video interfaces, and a social networking tool, and just a slew of different online tools. But yet the reason why we still need a physical space is because it's really not becoming obsolete. The physical space will actually become even more important because it will allow the students to collaborate, to be creative, and to connect with each other, especially in light of the fact that of social media, those tools, they tend to isolate the students, but what we really need to do is giving them a possibility to collaborate and to connect physically also as they're working together on really implementing those 21st century skills. Of course, since I just mentioned that languages have been in a decline, they've been viewed as less important, and at the same time we do have the important challenge of their global interdependence. We really need champions. And here you see that with my little champion that I've put on this globe. And what is really important that as we are increasing the awareness and the need for global partnerships, for global projects, we also need to increase the language offerings, which we may have to do in smaller institutions in a very creative way, because a wide range of language offerings will also raise the level of importance among students for those study abroad experiences. And as we also develop global partnerships with other institutions and use problem-based projects, we prepare students for global citizenship. Okay, as we're looking at designing and managing those learning spaces, for those who are not familiar with the 21st century skills, here is one of several different models. So we have a relevant and an applied curriculum with informative assessments. We have social and emotional connections, a culture of creativity and innovation, and then 24/7 access to technology tools and resources, and then of course the outcomes. This particular graph is from the Apple classrooms of tomorrow today. There are similar ones also that have been published by the Partnership for 21st Century Skills. Okay, what does this mean for us? Here I'm using a slide, or reusing a slide that I use in this joint presentation with Mike Ledgerwood for the very first IELTS webinar. As we're looking at space, it's really important to look at the whole program. It may mean that we need new majors and minors to really meet the needs of the 21st century learner. Also new concentrations, new internships, then collaborative and global projects. We also need more collaboration among departments, and it really starts with interdisciplinary initiatives, then capstone courses, but also with learning outcomes and assessment that are collaboratively assessed. Then for creating the 21st century learning space, what we need is new language centers or collaborative learning spaces that may be interdisciplinary. Also a good idea is to have not only formal spaces, but also more those spaces that are really designed for social interactions, like a language cafe or spaces for the clubs. And then also spaces that allow online and distance learning or video conferencing where the students can actually meet in one space and then connect to people in another space. Here's some models for 21st century learning. On the top you see Pinecrest School. That's a photo of that school in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. That will be actually one of our host sites for the IELTS 2013 conference. Below that you also see just a little graphic for the K through 12 education model that has been created in Great Britain. Here again, and it's actually introduced in TED Talks by Morgan. And here the focus is again on special purposefully created schools that are connected to companies, and those schools focus really on project-based learning, teamwork, and solving real-world projects in order to promote student engagement. Okay, and of course, student engagement is really one of the other key areas for 21st century, focusing on the 21st century learners. Here's one of our other publications from IELTS. It's called Task-Based 3, where it really gives very concrete examples for task-based projects that are student-generated and promote active learning and are also ideal for collaborative learning. And they can be completed with a variety of technology tools. Okay, here just a little teaser. As we're looking at 21st century learning spaces, here are photos from the IELTS 2013 conference site, or actually conference sites, because the IELTS 2013 conference is co-hosted by Pinecrest School in Fort Lauderdale, and also by Florida Atlantic University. And as part of the pre-conference sessions, we will have special tours. Traditionally, they were called lab tours. Those are now tours of learning spaces, and you can see some of those photos. One on the top left is a photo that has very comfortable furniture that really allows a student to collaborate as they also relax. Then you see on the photo below a very wide screen that's designed for students to connect their devices and then to collaborate together. And then yeah, and on the very bottom right, you see one of those areas or one of those examples for spaces in between that again encourage student collaborations as they just sit down and maybe work on their devices or on their laptops between classes, and then engage with other learners. Here, of course, now moving from the design and different aspects of design to assessment. This is very important, although the area of language learning does not have any special accrediting standards. This is something that we've been discussing and something we would like to see actually in the future. But it's really still important to look at, well, there are standards in some ways that exist from the from ACTFL, the American Council for the Teaching of Foreign Languages, but yet it's not formally used for accrediting universities. But here the focus for these outcomes would be really to see what kind of learning environments do we design, professional development, curriculum instruction, and what standards and assessments do we have that support those skills for the students, like life and career skills, or innovation skills and learning skills, those 4 C's, which derive from the 3 R's. Then information, media, and technology skills. And then, of course, also the core subjects, the 3 R's, but that are now actually enhanced by 21st century themes. And as we look here, At assessment, of course, we really need to create a culture of evidence, and it's something that we need to keep in mind as we're starting with the design of our learning center or the redesign. We have to look at the individual programs, at program review, at institutional effectiveness, and also at class-based assessment. Ultimately, it really needs to benefit the students as we're working backwards to design the learning spaces. We actually help students to monitor their learning and to really take an active role in their learning, and also to create electronic portfolios. There was also a question about formative assessment. Where can we find that? There are some technology tools here. CAL, the Center for Applied Linguistics, actually has a very nice database, and I have a screenshot here. I just at this time just selected French for the college level, intermediate, and informative evaluation. As you hit search, you get all those possible tests that come up. So here it's hopefully helpful for those who are looking for formative assessment tools. Yeah, learning center design, I've mentioned that before. A very helpful tool may be this publication. For those who are IELTS members, as you log into the IELTS website, there is actually a companion site that goes with this text. The IELTS Management Manual, that's the second publication, was published in 2003. The third one, okay, I have one too many, I apologize. That's to be published in 2013. So that's currently being prepared for the next conference. IELTS webinars, of course, we have some more coming up here. And yeah, as I mentioned before, as a big teaser, the IELTS 2013 conference is in June 11th through 15th in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I would already like to invite you to join us. This is really a great opportunity to attend sessions on IELTS, on management, and also on design. And then also on really taking a look at 21st century learning spaces. Here's some photographs from there. This is at Pinecrest School. Actually, all of those schools, those pictures are. So it's one of those schools that has actually currently or recently been featured in a journal article about schools that have active and creative language spaces. Okay, now I really don't want to talk only. I want to give you an opportunity to actually ask questions. We can revisit some of the items that I mentioned before. Maybe Evan, you can just open the microphone to allow the participants to join in.
Sure. For those of you who are interested in using the mic, go ahead and press the talk button, or you can write your questions in the chat box.
Okay. Okay, I don't hear any questions.
There's some people chatting.
Yep, there's some people typing stuff into the chat box. So.
Okay. Very good.
You have to wait just a second for some of those to show up.
Okay. I actually have an answer to a question that I did not incorporate earlier, and that's a question about live chat tools. One person asked that, who wanted to know what kind of tools are there for language learning that actually have live chat that allows students to connect with other students. And Of course, there's some tools like Mango that is available for by subscription through libraries. A lot of libraries at university levels have that already. Then there would be also Live Mocha or My Language Exchange. It would be another tool, or iTalki or Conversation Exchange. So I don't know whether anybody, whether the person who asked those questions is actually currently in the session. Okay.
We do
Okay, and I see actually
have some questions in the chat window now, Uta, if you're ready to have some of those.
Okay.
The first one was actually asked while you were doing your presentation, and it was a question about the cost of that space at Pinecrest School. Is that information that you have, or can you speak in general about when you're looking at remodeling, what kind of costs you're looking at?
Okay, well, of course, for the cost, the sky is usually the limit. I know it's, for Pinecrest, I do not know, but I know it's really a college prep school that is in the richest district of Fort Lauderdale, so I don't think funding has ever been a problem at that school. So in that sense, it's kind of a nice model, but so you can take away a lot of ideas, and you may have to just scale back as you're looking at some of those items. And that's what we are actually doing currently here, also at Walsh. We have this big building. The fundraising is about to start, actually, or the silent phase is already underway. But while we're getting ready for that new space, we're working on the design for remodeling a currently existing space, and to develop that into a lab or a model learning space that really helps to develop the faculty and to work on special global and collaborative projects with the students, really in a 21st century space. And we're actually right now still in the dream phase, where we've walked through the physical space. We looked at the measurements, talked with the person who is in charge of campus projects about adding walls into the space, because it's right now an open space. And closing it off, and then we've just looked at different configurations for the furniture. We looked at different pieces of technology that are collaborative, and right now we don't worry about cost yet. That will come later. So at this point, we're still in the dream stage, and it's actually, from my experience, what I've done beforehand when I actually worked on developing a new center. I started with dreaming really big with the faculty, and then we started to scale it back some. But if you start really small by just looking at cost, your whole project will be small and won't be very creative. So it's great to just shoot for the stars first, and then to come back down to the moon if you don't get the funding.
All right.
Yeah.
The next question is from Mita, and she typed in, that open space projected seems rather large. Is that a common space? Yes. Are you referring to the new building those images that I showed for our new building? Okay, it looks like she may be typing in an answer to that. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yes.
I was referring, sorry, I was chatting before. Yeah, it's that big space that was shown in one of the pictures. There's a lot of people standing, and it was quite wide.
Right. Okay. Well, this building is actually designed pretty much like a library commons. That basically means it has 3 levels. When you enter, it's kind of a wide open space that allows for a lot of different activities. where the students just can go in and just sit down at an area and study with other students, or it can be used by clubs, or it can be used as a performance space. So it's a very flexible space, kind of one of the, like what we would refer to as the noisy space in the library commons area. And then the next level is a space that is subdivided, where you have some free flow spaces still, where you basically connect two classrooms, so they can collaborate with each other. They can basically have interdisciplinary or tandem type projects, and then connect also globally. And then on the top level, there's a space where students can work individually or in small groups, and it's more the silent space. So just to give you an idea. And that upstairs area would be also available for tutoring sessions.
Right, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, do you have other questions?
We had one from Deanne. And she said that this design is very impressive. How many students do you serve? And how is that represented by majors, minors versus Gen Ed?
Okay. That's a very good question. This space is actually one that is designed to truly be a 21st century space, in the sense that it's also designed to break down the silos that exist within the institution, where we have humanities or math and sciences, and language and letters, and theology, and business and education. So the goal is really not to bring in any specific discipline, but rather to bring in project-driven or groups that are driven by projects, and also to have it also to really well, the projects and the collaboration, this is really what drives the building. So anybody who has anything that's innovative, the space will be theirs, but it won't be owned by anybody. And so the task force actually will be the one that will help guide the use of the space. And the way we want to practice that already in our initial model learning spaces, we have a self-scheduler that we want to purchase and post it on the outside of the door. And so people just can self-schedule the use of the space. And it's also designed to be open 24/7. So this way, if I were to connect with Mita in India, instead of doing it 3 p.m. Eastern, where she has to get up at midnight, I could actually find a different time that's more suitable for her students than mine. Okay, did this answer the question? Okay, so other questions? Somehow I seem to have a hard time with the chat, the way it's scrolling.
We do have a couple of comments rather than questions, and Judy mentioned that one good thing about pioneers like Pinecrest is that one can ask the instructors what kinds of spaces get used and how. So is that, and I know with what used to be the lab tours that happened during IELTS conferences, I'm assuming that was part of the idea there, is that you could talk with people about their spaces and find out what worked and what didn't work. Right, exactly. And that's actually what we'll have in Pinecrest and also in Florida Atlantic University. Actually, if I go back a little bit, well, that's okay. Is there any way I can jump back to other pages, or not, Evan? Okay.
Yes, if you, next to the left-right arrows, if you click on that, the button, it will open up all of the slide titles, and you can double-click on that. Okay, I'm not so sure whether I see what you are referring to. Okay. Nope. Okay. I'm trying to find just one image again. Which slide, Uta?
Okay, I just look through my printouts.
Do you remember the title?
Yeah, it's under the photos from the conference site, actually. That was, yeah, I'll just jump through here.
Okay.
Here it is. So this one, actually in the center, this one is a little bit dark. Here's a space that has collaborative use and is really in a very in a beautiful building. It's mostly used by the School of Engineering, but it's also used in an interdisciplinary way. It's in Florida Atlantic, so we'll have tours going there. And then the other one that's also in Florida Atlantic, that university, is this space. It's called the Living Room Theater, and this is really one of those spaces that's really designed to be a project-based space. As it actually suggests, those are truly movie theaters, and it's all run by students, and there's a development end, a place where the students create movies. And then on the other side here, you have several movie theaters where the students actually can show their the movies they produced. Something like this can be done also in a very small scale for language centers, actually, where you have a space where students can see international movies, but then they can also create movies, you know, for those tools like iMovie, and as part of class projects, and then show them also in such a way. So there are examples out there for that. For example, at Brigham Young University, they do have different types of spaces, like a cafe or like a movie theater, or a space where they can students really can watch something that they've created as well. So here for those lab tours, the way we want to set them up is that the persons who were involved in the design actually lead the tour and give some more background, and also explain how it was used, what the design drivers were, and what the actual initial design for the room consisted of, and how it actually is now being used. So those would be good questions. And I noticed as we walked through those spaces during the preparation phase for the conference, we took a lot of pictures, and a lot of people focused on, you know, where are the outlets on the wall, or what is hidden in the background, and how is the technology actually supported. And those will be also the kind of things we focus on, that those who would like to focus on remodeling their spaces or building a new space can actually get some ideas. Okay, other questions?
One other comment from Catherine was, I think it's best when the design of the space is developed within the context of the institution, right, taking as many characteristics of the students, instructors, faculty, and administration into consideration. Mm-hmm. Yep, that's perfect. I couldn't agree with it more. Actually, I'm still fairly new at Walsh University, and the design of this building really came about through, or predated me, so I'm more in the implementation phase now, or preparing the faculty phase. And but for the design, actually, the faculty and the administration and also the architects got together and had brainstorming sessions, and then sessions where they focused on really what are the key drivers for the university, what are the important pillars of the institution, and how do those flow into the space. So, and so those are the areas that really determine what the space will look like. And since our institution is a faith-based institution, this is also being reflected in the building. Okay. Great. And one more question from Mita, which is, would there be video conferencing capacity in every classroom, or would there be a dedicated video conferencing space?
Okay. Well, this is an interesting question. Right now, even though the building is actually designed, and so the basic design functionality is there for some of the details of the spaces with the Learning Spaces Task Force, we will actually have to go back and look what kind of equipment will go where. Video conferencing, since we don't have classrooms per se, we have those spaces that are collaborative. So right now we envision them as having video conferencing capability. Then we're also looking, of course, at interactive whiteboards and also as the writable walls and other things. But really, video conferencing is very important for the classroom. But then, of course, for smaller projects, students can also already use their tablets to connect. But for the big spaces, it definitely will be there. For individual spaces, maybe not as much. And I really can't give you the exact answer yet because we haven't discussed all those elements in detail yet. But for our model classroom space, we definitely fully will have video conferencing capability. That's one of the keys because we really want to be able to connect to classes beyond the walls. And of course, we want to build in as many collaborative features as possible.
Great, thank you. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat right now, so I'm actually going to ask one of my questions, which is, what are some techniques that you use to figure out what your community needs and what sort of space is going to fit the needs of your particular student?
Okay. Well, right now we're still in the planning phase for this model space, as I mentioned before, and we're looking at basically students' future tense right now for this space because some of our current students are not necessarily quite there yet with the 21st century skills. So the key is really flexibility. And we've had only one meeting of the task force so far, so we haven't finalized our plans yet. But we have formed subcommittees. One subcommittee is focusing on furniture, and we've had several meetings where we actually, with the subcommittee, where we measured the space, looked at furniture design from some of the big companies like Steelcase, and then looked what kind of furniture would fit in there, how would it actually make the space collaborative, and how can we accommodate different types of students, also disabled students, and how can we actually make it flexible enough so that the students can move around for different types of activities while also still making sure that the technology pieces are there. But of course this is going to be a learning process for both faculty and students at this point, because our campus right now is very traditional, so there's some really good projects that have already been implemented already, but in overall speaking, this has only been done mostly by early adopters, so it's not the kind of thing that you see really in all the classrooms yet. So we're really working on the faculty development end for that as well, or we're planning to do so. We haven't. I mean, there were already some good things in place, like faculty learning communities. There's one faculty learning community right now that actually uses the text of or the book by one of our architects, and I have it actually here. It's called The Third Teacher. Okay, my camera is a little bit off. That really looks at the space as a third teacher and really what that means for the classroom, and also for designing the environment. Okay, did that answer your question?
Yes, yes,
okay.
Thank you. And we have one more question from the chat window from Mita, who says, you said there aren't any classrooms, but only those learning spaces. How big are the learning spaces, and how many students would they cater to?
Okay. Again, this is some of those I don't have the concrete answers yet, because we're kind of playing with that as well, since right now our official classrooms have different sizes. But we're just looking, so it's kind of a guess at this point, probably about 24 students for one space, and then with the ability of it connecting to another one with a similar amount of students. But yeah, you couldn't hold me to that estimate here. But for the model space, it will be about 25 students. Because if we make the room too full, then they won't be able to really walk around and move about again, since that's one of the key design elements.
All right, and we've got time for one last question. Mita's wondering how many square meters are needed approximately for 24 students?
Okay, well, I really can't answer that question right now. I would have to send it back to you, so because I didn't have a specific formula for that. As we are actually developing the design for our current space, and we're playing with software and trying to put furniture inside, I can share that with you, so if that would help you.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for attending today's webinar. And as Evan mentioned, it was recorded, and we will be posting that recording later on. So if you joined partway through or had to leave early, you'll be able to catch the whole thing. And our next webinar will be on Tuesday, December 4th. Using an interactive whiteboard for communicative language teaching is the topic. So hope to see you next time, and thanks for coming.
Okay, thank you everybody. I do have this handout still available, and I think Evan will also make the PowerPoint available. So thank you very much.